So we are Team Pushpaka, which comprises of Amit, George, Rishi you already know, myself, Sayandeep, Siddharth Ravi Kumar, and Siddharth Shetty. So we are a bunch of enthusiasts from India who are trying to work on the drone ecosystem and policy level of how drone ecosystem will evolve in India. We are part of iSpirit Foundation also. So I'll talk about iSpirit Foundation as well. So in today's webinar, we'll try to cover what is the concept of operation and why do we need a concept of operation for unmanned aircraft systems in India? Yeah. So regarding iSpirit, so iSpirit is a think tank in India. It takes a long-term approach towards problem solving. By long-term, it takes a 30 years approach in the way that they plan to be the architects of India and influence things at the layer where they can make a leap of 30 years. So yeah, so regarding iSpirit has been very helpful in making this drone policy progression of this drone policy. This would be the outline of today's session, where we will try to talk about how does the current ecosystem of drones look like in India. What has been the roadmap till now? What policies have been issued by the government, and what is the current view? What is the current progress? Then we talk about why is there no concept of operations till now? Why it must exist, and what should it look like? Then I'll hand it over to Siddharth for talking about how we plan to implement that, and then in the last part we'll take up the question answers. So we'll try to cover this up in 30 minutes, and then we'll keep 30 minutes for question and answers. So so for reading the article on the detailed article on concept of operations, you can scan this QR code on the left, and for posting any questions, you can scan this QR code on the right. You'll find links specific to these. You can post your questions there. Let's start with why do we need drones for the Indian society, and what kind of use cases are there for drones? So one of the major use cases is in the geospatial mapping, and these are the kind of operation which can help us in doing surveys, doing large-scale planning, large-scale infrastructure planning using the surveys. So why would drones play an important role here? Because drones can be very important in reducing down the cost of these surveys, at the same time increasing the accuracy and increasing the efficiency of these surveys. So that would be one key factor where we're likely to see drones in the near future. Then this will also increase the accuracy of the data. This can increase the capability in the terms of we can get 2D maps and 3D maps of the space, and do a better planning based on these more data points, you can say. So another important area where drones would be used is precision agriculture. So by precision agriculture, we mean that there's a traditional way of using traditional equipments of farming. So moving away from there, we could be taking an approach which is more environment friendly. So putting right amount of fertilizer, putting right amount of pesticides at the right location, identifying those locations in a large field would be very helpful in reducing down the cost for the farmer, as well as it will have great and phenomenal impact on environment as well. So this is another key area where, since India is primarily agriculture based, it will see lots of use cases and lots of use of drones here. Another thing which is being seen and experimented a lot these days is use of drones in last mile logistics. So last mile logistics could be to deliver some package in an urban area which struggles with the traffic, or it could be in a rural area where the connectivity is very limited and we want to reach in short span of time. So this was also covered by last PM Mann Ki Baat, where he talked about the drones, where vaccines were delivered through drones. So last mile logistics in remote areas is another very key use case for drones. Then one big thing where India has a unique position is regarding the border security and applications related to security, where we face unique challenges from all our neighboring countries. So drones can be very important in monitoring as well as performing certain kinds of operations which would lead to enhanced security of the nation. Yeah, so given these, we are fairly sure that drones are going to play an important role in our society in near future. So let's look at how the regulations in India have evolved in last few years. So till 2014, there was very limited use of drone, and like the visibility, or you can say the need for any kind of formalization of drone was also not felt. Then in October 2014, instead of moving ahead, we took few steps back where there was a blanket ban on drone operations. So you can say it was more conservative way of putting security ahead, and we took some steps back. Then after some effort by various organizations where iSPIT was also involved, within 2-3 years, we were able to publish lots of regulations related to NPNT, and we were able to talk about how identification of drones would happen. And then in 2018, the Digital Sky platform was launched, and after that, things have been moving faster. So this year itself, we saw that there was drone rules published in in August 5 of this year, in 2021. So which took a approach which was way liberal. And so basically these policy regulations have been swinging between being too liberal to too conservative for industry players. So where too liberal would mean that it is compromising on the security, and too conservative would mean that making these operations feasible for the industry players is really hard. So this is what the landscape looked like till now. So what are we waiting on? So it has been 7 years, which is a long time, and we still do not have any technical specifications or standards which could be referred. There is no coherent timelines or coherent approach for developing these standards also. So that is definitely, we are waiting for those. Then we are also waiting for reference for implementations of these assembly line, manufacturing, drone pilot licensing, remote ID, and then unmanned traffic management systems. So these are the things which have been talked about briefly, but there is nothing concrete or coherent existing in the current policy. So in the recent drone rules, which were published on 5th of August, we made certain observations, and we were able to put forward our comments on that. So we'll try to put up here as in those in the drone rules what we found that they could have handled better. One of the things was that requirement for type certification has been mentioned, but the groundwork for making these type of certifications ready, or how do you provide these certifications, that has not been talked about in detail. Then one key aspect that has been missed out is how do we plan to integrate, or how do we plan to move towards an integrated airspace where manned and unmanned aircraft both could fly. So so that has been missed out. Other things which we felt was not covered were things related to privacy, things related to data security, and how data would be shared amongst various players. Which stakeholder can pull what data, and how would the data be stored? So these kind of things have not been covered. Then one key factor which is missing is import policy. What things are allowed to be imported, in what quantities, and what should not be imported at all to foster, you can say, domestic industry for that, or you can say an ecosystem of local players for developing those parts. That has also not been covered. Um, so one thing which was very key there was mandating insurance and training, which we feel should have been left to the market players for deciding uh, whether the insurance is needed for a particular part or not, or like particular kind of operations or not. And this might take an incremental approach of as the ecosystem matures, things would be more you can say things can become more hardbound, and you can put it as rules rather than just guidelines. So also, like, to foster Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need to have certain degree of experimentation which are allowed in the existing ecosystem. So there has to be some kind of sandboxing kind of thing for allowing experimentations, which has been not looked upon. And there is no recognition for hobby flying and these kind of R&D clubs. These are not covered in the current ecosystem. So with this, we try to come up with concept of operations. We try to come up with a concept of operations where we would like to put forward what kind of operations need to be covered. Okay, so we clearly mentioned that a concept of operation has been missed out in the current ecosystem. And what would concept of operation bring to the table? It will bring that coherent layer of thought process for keeping all the operations and keeping all your previous policy in line to approach a certain goal where the efficiency is also achieved and security is also not compromised. So keeping this in mind, we proposed a concept of operation there. So what is a concept of operation? So a concept of operation is a document that describes the characteristics for a proposed system from an integrated point of view to stakeholders. So basically, there are multiple stakeholders. They must know what part they are responsible for, and what others are responsible for, and how do they communicate amongst each other. So it's not a very technical document to say. It's a document which clearly highlights what each stakeholder must do, and how all the parties must collaborate to bring the bigger ecosystem live. Right. So via concept of operations in India now, so we can say that a concept of operations has not been implemented or has not been talked about yet, which can be one of the key things why we do not see anything progressing on ground actually. And we feel that with the help of concept of operations, we can make things even faster, like increase the efficiency while keeping all the security aspects, security first approach also in mind. And this has also been seen in the other organizations like FAA, EASA, ICAO. All of them have taken an approach where they have come up with ConOps, and these ConOps have helped them going ahead at a faster pace. So keeping all this in mind, we propose that there has to be a concept of operations for India. So what does a concept of operation do? So concept of operation leads to policy formation. Policy formations leads to definition of technical standards and specifications, which in turn lead to reference implementations. And this goes back again to making the concept of operation more dense, covering more things, and making the policy even more robust. And this cycle continues, and you form the complete ecosystem. So with this, I'll hand it over to Siddharth for talking about drones versus US and ARPAs and other kind of aerial vehicles.
Thanks, Manish, and welcome everybody. So when we get into drafting a concept of operations, I think it's important to lay down a few important definitions, and best to start with what a drone is. We here sort of have a mental picture of what a drone is, but that's sort of a layman's definition. From a regulatory standpoint, it's important to clarify to categorize drones in ways that make it clear, what operations, what the scope of their operations can be. So this unmanned aircrafts, the superset can be classified broadly into unmanned aircraft systems, remotely piloted aircrafts, and then model aircraft. And the remotely piloted aircraft are the ones that can potentially be integrated into the manned airspace. So your regular conventional civil aviation sort of segregated airspace, and the unmanned ones that need to be sort of kept away from that airspace, so that they don't need to follow the same regulations, follow the same rules, and they can sort of have their own set of enabling regulations. Next slide, please. So ICAO makes this critical distinction as well. So it says that RPAS can be integrated into alongside manned aircraft, whereas UA need to have their own sort of regulatory space. Next slide, please. And model aircraft are another category. I mean, they have sort of minimal impact on the regulatory burden as such, but they're a very important category because this is where all the innovation happens. Typically, model aircraft have optional payload and they're used for educational and recreational purposes only. Next slide, please. So in India, so the rules that have come out so far, they follow this categorization scheme based on the payload. So the weight categories are from nano to all the way up to micro, small, medium, and then large. So nano starts at under 250 grams, and then large goes all the way up to 100 to 500, 150 to 500 kilograms. So in our view as a team, they've not made significant enough distinctions to that make sort of meaningful regulatory requirements for the small to large categories, and we can sort of see that this whole set of terminology is borrowed from the international community, but they've not gone the whole way and harmonized it with what other countries are doing. So this in our view needs some serious review. Next slide, please. So for a concept of operations, it's important to define a whole broad set of applications, and so that we can sort of talk about each application in its own right, and what operations would mean, and what are the risks and so on. But when we as a group we've arrived at this conclusion that majority of these applications can be achieved through rotary wing. I mean, obviously some of them can use fixed wing, and we need all possible combinations, but right off the gate, it's important to focus on something that is readily achievable and also maximally enables at the very beginning. So this is our view. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'll hand this over to Manish. He's going to be talking about the guiding principles.
Okay, so while talking about the guiding principle for developing regulations, there are 4 key things. One is efficiency. So efficiency in the terms of how fast can we deliver. Safety, will this delivery lead to any compromise in safety of people on ground or infrastructure? Security, will this cause any loophole in the internal security or security of restricted spaces like industrial corridors, borders, or airports? So these 3 things, you can say, are very important while delivering the policy. While another way to look at it is that while making the policy, we should not take a complete idealistic approach where we say that everything would be available. We need to be very well aware of what kind of constraints we do have at current time, and using be patient with those constraints and then implement whatsoever is possible in the most efficient way, and try to solve for these infrastructure constraints also becomes a big problem. Okay, so to elaborate on what efficiency is, so we can say that efficiency in terms of policy formulation should be in a way that we are not forming policies such that the approach is very conservative, where we compare manned aviation and we are comparing unmanned aviation. So like you can say for a very small drone, it should not have lots of compliances. Like for a nano drone, it cannot cause lots of damage. So making it equal to, you can say, manned aviation standards is something which will reduce down the efficiency. So we need to make things such that the efficiency in the system does exist and things move faster as expected. Safety, as already covered, that the safety is regarding people, is regarding assets, it's regarding key areas, infrastructure areas, damage to infrastructure. So while giving operational clearances to drone operations and forming policies for them, we should also be aware of what kind of safety regulations must be formed, what kind of regulations or checks and balances need to be kept in place such that there is minimal to no safety issue. Yep. So moving to security. Security is, as covered earlier, is in terms of border areas or exposing those airspaces which can cause information leak. So these kind of things can lead to security problems. So there must be ways to counter these security issues as well. And these security issues and the countermeasures must be covered in the policy. While covering the security, we must also talk about bad actors and good actors, and how do we differentiate them. Is there a way to potentially identify good actor from bad actor by anyone and report those bad actors such that counter UAS measures can be taken? So that becomes one key thing. Other than that, we have infrastructure issues which form the constraints. So so these constraints are not very specific to India. These constraints do exist elsewhere, like throughout the globe. One of the key constraints you can say is in the communication side. So drones generally use telemetry or 4G data, 5G data, you can say, for long distance communication through to the US systems. Then if there is an issue of connectivity after let's say 300 feet or 400 feet, then there has to be an infrastructure challenge which has to be taken parallelly, which addresses this problem, and we are able to achieve connectivity in remote areas as well as beyond 300 feet height as well. So these infrastructure challenges have to be identified independently and worked upon independently, so that we see an efficient drone ecosystem in India. So so in the suggested ConOps for India, we take an incremental approach, so that those operations which have immediate need and which can be commenced as soon as possible, they are unblocked, and we are ready to go ahead with that without posing any risks to the existing system. And so basically, the next steps, which could be complex drone operations, could be put forward into the next stages, and we start with the first layer of operations, giving it the allowing it to mature in a way that it is able to demonstrate to the industry, it is able to demonstrate to the policymakers, it is also able to demonstrate to the investors that that there is a proof of concept for these kinds of operations, and bringing lots of investments, or you can say making this ecosystem mature. So unblocking it while keeping the security in mind. So we have divided these operations into 4 categories. These are called category A, B, C, and D. Based on the capability and the risk they pose, we divide each kind of operation, you can say, into these categories. So I'll cover these categories in detail. So category A are basically VLOS operation, which are within the visual line of sight. These are mostly small drones for the purpose of photography or videography. They would be operated at safe distance from people, animal, infrastructure, and aerodromes, such that the risk to these infrastructures are minimal, and risk to the drones, risk to people is also minimal. So we are, so this category can be you can say launched immediately, or can be made operational immediately, because it doesn't need UTM support. It does not have it does not support those drones which have a high capability. So there is a restriction on mass, speed, and there's a restriction on the kind of drones which can be used for category A operations. Okay. So now moving to category B, we in category B we'll have slightly more complex operations, and these could be again visual line of sight or extended visual line of sight kind of thing, but they're also fairly away from infrastructure and people, but they would be more complex. They can carry more complex payloads, like they could be carrying pesticides, insecticides for agricultural purposes. So so these become slightly, you can say, complex than category A, yet they do not pose lots of risk to man or to people as well as to infrastructure. Then we have category B. More details about category B where we use these kind of so all those drones which are in visual line of sight as well as extended visual line of sight can be put in here for a specific use case, for the specific payloads which are not dangerous, you can say. These non-dangerous payloads could be for agriculture, for flights, for surveying also. Yep. So the third category becomes the category C. So in category C, category C would be for VLOS, BVLOS operations, which are which become like drastically more complex than VLOS operations. So this will pose greater safety challenges also. This would also need that the pilot is qualified enough to fly these kind of, to operate these kind of drones which are in BVLOS zone. So there has to be a certification process for operating these drones, and the pilot needs some certificate for qualifications in these kind of operations. And also for the capability of the drones, these drones could have higher mass and speed capabilities. These could be heavier, as well as they could fly at a faster pace, could carry complex payloads also. So they pose greater risk. So so now continuing to category D. So category D is fairly very complicated, you can say, kind of operations which involve high risk. One of the examples could be air taxi, where people are using these drones for taxis. So these will be flying on over the people operations. These are over the people operations, as well as they're carrying people themselves. And these drones are also heavier and they're faster. So they pose lots of challenge in terms of security, and they can be taken at a very later stage when the things are mature enough, where we are able to at least cater some flights in category A, B, and C. Then we can look into category D. Okay. So now we'll talk about implementing this US concept of operations. So I'll hand over to Siddharth for taking this up.
Thanks. So when we come to implementing ConOps, it's our view that we have to on the one hand balance enabling as much as possible right out of the gate, but also keep in mind the fact that everything from the technology itself, the maturation of the technology and the technical capability, and the regulatory institutional capacity that exists, all of these have to be sort of balanced. So it's sort of impractical, unrealistic to think about coming down with regulations from top of a hill and saying these are the sort of final regulations. It's important to start with permitting operations that are legitimizing operations that are basically already happening, so that people have all the players in the marketplace have an incentive to become part of the system, while also in the background sort of working on as we improve the technical capacity, when we have unmanned traffic management systems and automated management systems for that, and then when we have more clear idea about design standards for advanced large drones and stuff like that. So we have to keep working on these in the background, but right out of the gate, enable as much as possible, and then keep expanding what kinds of operations we enable. So in our view, the category A and restricted category B are perfect candidates for this, for sort of immediate enablement. This would sort of enable your existing sort of video photography, hobby flying, and mapping activities. This is strictly VLOS operations and there are no special requirements. And once in 6 months or so, when our UTM policy is fully in place and implementation details have sort of been worked out, we can then start allowing some BVLOS operations in segregated airspace, and then this would enable a big chunk of category B and category C operations. So that would be things like large scale mapping or agricultural operations and stuff like that. And once we have the design standards for advanced UASs, then we can and once we have integration between unmanned airspace and manned airspace traffic management systems, then we can allow sort of large scale operations like your just freight cargo and operations during the night and so on. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, I'm going to run through these, at a very high level quickly. So category A, we suggest that, keep it, 2 kg or less, and then, strictly VLOS, operate at a safe distance away from, people, airports, and, any sensitive installations, and so on. And, keep it below 60 meters. And this would ensure that, there's minimal risk of any sort of damage or incidents and so on. And this also does not require any, UTM, and this does not require any specialized kind of pilot training. Pilots only need to be aware of the basic rules and the basic safety criteria, and you can also there's no integration needed with manned airspace, because this can be completely segregated. Next slide, please. And restricted category B would be less than 25 grams, 25 kilograms. But again, we are looking at primarily VLOS or enhanced VLOS, where the main pilot is assisted by other observers that have line of sight, and going all the way up to 400 feet. And in suitable weather conditions and so on. Still, the risk of accidents is still kind of minimal. This can be restricted category B. Next slide. And the pilot does not need to have any specialized knowledge still, and well within within safe distance of airports and international borders and so on. Next slide, please. So for the designers and manufacturers, right out of the gate for category A and B, the requirement should be very minimal in our view. It's not a very helpful approach to bring the maximum sort of risk averseness into the picture. I think we think that it's good enough to if manufacturers can show some accountability in terms of show having a record of all their transactions and uniquely being able to ID each drone that they manufacture, and the components, and prove that their drones cannot fly above a certain height restriction and so on. Next slide, please. And coming to pilot authorization, it's our view that we don't need especially for category A and restricted category B operations, we don't need very involved sort of specialized pilot training. A very basic online exam for proving awareness of all these safety safety and regulatory basic regulations is good enough. So an online exam at authorized centers is good enough in our view. And we can sort of keep working on this. This does not need to be a final solution, but as and when the industry matures, the market matures, we have more data about what happens out there. We can sort of improve these online exams and have higher standards for them. Next slide. So once we go above, category B and above, then we can sort of have the DGCA or QCI certify courses, so that there is a there's a guaranteed minimum standard for all of these courses that need to be passed by remote pilots. It's still not very very specific or very highly technical sort of knowledge, but it gives it gives the regulator a good assurance that the people who are flying these are definitely qualified. Next slide, please. I spoke about this a little bit before, but it's very important to enable the ecosystem that already exists first, and then sort of expand out from there, as opposed to having regulations that cover the entire gamut of all possible operations, and then kind of lacking all the details and the specificity to give the regulations any teeth and bones and so on. So once we have, so the immediate requirement would be that we want to enable category A and restricted category B, for which remote pilot requirements can be simplified. Just have an online exam, like we said. Airworthiness is not something that is strictly, airworthiness requirements are especially for category A and restricted category B, they don't really make that much sense in our considered view. So they can be sort of postponed, sort of put into review, so that what's already out there can be enabled today. So with Atmanirbharta in mind, I think we need to lay down import policy such that we don't want to we want to incentivize local production of drones. I mean, this is an industry that's in its sort of springtime, and the most of the revolutionary stuff is yet to come. So this is an industry that is about to take off, and we want to incentivize local production, local know-how, local industry as much as possible to and innovation as much as possible. So so the import policy needs to be formulated accordingly, such that we enable assemblers, because I mean we have to realize also that we don't have all of the production of all of the components in house. We don't have the established capacity already, while other countries do. And so manufacturers can sort of start as assemblers, put together existing parts into drones, and then sort of move up the value chain from there, and sort of their value addition can be higher. And in terms of insurance, the current rules do talk about insurance, and it not in a very helpful way. We think that insurance need not be mandated at this stage for any drone categories, because there are no serious marketplace that exists, and there is no data out there to and we believe that the market can sort of drive adoption of insurance at this stage at least. Yeah, and we think that we have to take a sort of long-term view of this. So I mean, obviously the rules that we put out now need not be the final ones. We need to sort of keep working on them. So to keep working on them, we can't depend on the current political environment and the sort of push for it and the political will for it. We think that drone promotion should be subsumed by an SPV, sort of like the UIDAI and so on. So that there is a vested interest somewhere within the government for keeping drone policy going and keeping it current. Next slide, please. So the long term, very important, to keep working on it. Like I've already mentioned, so we need to sort of start from guiding principles, put out policy that is, just right, that is just appropriate, and that reflects the sort of, current technology, technical capacity, and the sort of institutional capacity, but then keep working on it, keep putting out, keep updating, frequently, so, to keep pace with the industry and to keep pace with the market. An SPV would, needs to be set up with a charter, in our view, to formulate future policy making that keeps in mind, it has a ConOps that sort of sets out the guiding principles and sort of lays the broad big picture, and then sort of the implementation details can keep they can be worked on continuously. Next slide, please. so we come to the end of the presentation. We've sort of given you a big picture idea of why we need ConOps, and sort of why we need to start from there. What would a ConOps document do, and what should the ConOps do right now, and what should we think about going forward into the future? We'd love to listen to your questions, and please send us your queries, and I look forward to more interaction during the Q&A. Thank you. Yeah, Amit, do you want to unmute yourself? I think you've already been sort of answering. Mr. Sunil GD has been asking some questions, and you've already been sort of interacting with them. Can you sort of tell us about what's been asked and what you've been talking about in the chat?
Yeah, sure, Ravi. So hi Sunil, thanks for your questions. Just for the benefit of everyone else who's on the meeting, Sunil had 2 points to make. The first point that he made was regarding the QCI status on certification, and the fact that possibly DGCA has already kind of roped in QCI for the drone certification. But maybe we can talk about that in a bit. The other point that he made was that he agrees with the concept of or the need for a ConOps, and he was wondering what are the frameworks that we have used. He quoted some JARUS documents saying that there were initially two operational categories, which is quite right about. That was, but to my understanding, that was way back in 2016. Subsequently, as the JARUS team kept working on it, they came out with subdividing it into 3 categories, which is what the EASA regulations today are based on. The 3 categories being open, specific, and certified. So there is a very clear distinction between these 3 categories, and in some schools of thought, they probably very well cover the entire spectrum. But then in our context, what we thought was that the open category itself could need a little distinction in our context, because we have not yet been able to put regulations in place, nor do we have the mechanism for that. And so that the industry could take off immediately where other issues are not a consideration. So we kind of took on that concept and refined it in our internal discussions, and we came up with broadly 4 categories. And we use the words category A, B, C, D for our lack of imagination and thinking of better terms for now. But pretty much the idea is there, which has already been explained by Ravi and Manish. I hope that answers this part, Sunil. Coming back to the question of QCI. So what our understanding is that DGCA has practically outsourced the whole certification thing to QCI and said that QCI will do the certification, which is fine. But the point that we are trying to make is it is easy to say QCI will certify, but when you say certified, it means it is benchmarked against some standards. So where are those standards? They need to be published. For example, if what is the fire protection or the structural strength of the drones that are manufactured? Are they supposed to be 2x or they're supposed to be 5x? What is that? Similarly, if I want to benchmark the electronic components on board, the batteries, what are the discharge rates or temperature considerations, so that an end user or a buyer, when he thinks that he's buying a certified product, he's aware that this product has a certain quality and will be able to do the job that he's expecting to do. So that is what we are talking about when we say that the standards need to be published by DGCA. I hope I've made my points, and I would love to get more feedback.
Yep. If any of the attendees have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or scan the QR code, submit your feedback. Yeah, all comments are welcome. Please feel free.
So I think I've unmuted Mr. Sunil, so you can go ahead and just hope that, we hope that we've answered his question, but please go ahead and ask if there are any follow-ups.
Yeah, Yeah, hello, I'm Sunil. I'm from Detect Technologies. Also, with respect to the first question, which is regarding QCI releasing a certification criteria document. So within the document, where possible, at least within the like currently available standards, whether they're IES standards or IEC standards, they have defined for certain requirements, like for batteries that they have to adhere with IS or IS standards. I think it's 17, some certain standard number. And similarly for EMI, EMC and few other requirements, they have defined it, but not for like certain things like FOS and stuff that Mr. Amit was talking about. But I think there is some reference to some IS or global standards, IS or IEC standards for certain line items. It's not defined for every line item as such, but it is partially defined for certain line items. I mean, just wanted to tell that point. Yeah, and I think this was released in September 2020. This QCI certification criteria.
Yeah, thanks, Sunil. I mean, you are right, but the point is, when we talk of certification standards, they have to be comprehensive, they have to be widely available, and also be in the context of what classification we have used. So for every classification, there would need to be different standards, right? Based on what is the risk of that particular category. So when you want to divide, for example, the entire range of drones in India into 5 categories, there possibly need to be 5 different standards, maybe not for every line item, but as a combination, there need to be different standards. So that kind of a detailed work would be required, and other countries, to our understanding, are already working on it. But not so in the case of, so at a macro level, we have kind of said that there have to be certification standards, but the detailing work seems to be not yet actively underway.
Got it. Yeah, I believe like when you have defined the 4 categories, so if you go to maybe category D specifically, there a certain whole new set of standards would have to come in. But for certain categories, maybe certain common standards might work out. Yeah, that point is correct. Yeah. And another point is, I was reading through the document, that link that you had shared along with the invite. So in that it was mentioned that the drone rules would have to be amended with the CONOPS, but wouldn't it be the role of the Civil Aviation Authority who would be releasing the CONOPS and not the Ministry of Civil Aviation? I know DGCF falls under Ministry of Civil Aviation, but CONOPS would not be present as a part of the law or rules, right? It would be a part of the civil aviation requirements or guidelines released by the regulatory National Aviation Authority.
So I'll take that on again. So yeah, you're right. But when we drafted the CONOPS document, that was more as our feedback for the draft drone rules, which were published towards the end of August. And so we were trying to suggest that these kind of policy swings from what was published in March to what was being published as the draft, and the draft was out in the public domain for a very short time, are maybe not very good for the evolution of policy. So that's where we brought in the idea of the concept of operations, and we said that you first please have a discussion on the CONOPS and then go ahead. But of course, all that is now water under the bridge. The government has gone ahead and published the drone rules 2021. But that having been said, we are looking forward to whether there can be eventual alignment between the two as well, because even now in the drone rules that have been published, certain bottlenecks, for example, issues on pilot training, are still there is no clarity on stuff like that. And in our internal discussions, we feel that a lot of responsibility is being put on the pilot, and a lot of training requirements are being put on, which are actually not commensurate with the kind of operations that the individual is expected to do. So there are gaps in the policy which exists now, and possibly the best way to resolve all of these is to have a well ironed out concept of operations, which we subsequently keep implementing as a country.
Yeah, but the concept of operations would be from DGCA, right, and not as a part of the rule document as such, because I'm not sure, because currently DGCA has already released a set of cars in 2018, like the timeline had shown. But I don't know how valid the cars are at present with the new rules 2021. So I think DGCA would have to release an amended car anyway. I think concept of operation should be included within that car.
So the car is no longer valid because the car was published under Aircraft Rules 1937. But now that the drone rules are there, the drone rules were designed primarily to be able to overcome the deficiencies of the car. So the car is history, but whether the cars or the US rules 2021 or the drone rules 21, on a regulatory side, we still have gaps.
Okay, so we are at the last 5 minutes before we wrap up. So I'm just gonna turn on, everybody. I'm gonna allow everybody to talk. So if anybody has anything, just unmute yourself and ask anything you'd like to ask.
Like I have a question. This is Sunil again. So what is the timeline that you're looking at to talk to DGCA or Minister of Civil Aviation regarding the CONOPS requirement?
I think we've not yet come up with a timeline ourselves, but the way we are proceeding is we're actually moving on to UTM policy, and because that is the sort of work item that the MOCA and DGCA will be actively looking for feedback on. And then we can link back to the concept of operations. That's how we are proceeding. So, I mean, in terms of timeline, maybe we're actually working on a UTM draft policy right now. Maybe a month or so we'll be entering the technical standards side. So that will give us a good point to touch base with the MOCA and so forth.
Yeah, and another thing is the national UTM policy framework was released, I think, a few days back.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we currently reviewing it in detail, but honestly, it's not. I mean, it doesn't have too much of content to be
that's
discussing, honestly. So we are actually writing up the more detailed one, which will hopefully inform future discussions.
okay.
So maybe Manish could flash it towards the end also.
So the next area of focus is the UTM, and then would be the CONOPS. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, concept of operations is not it's not a formal document. I mean, it can be, but I don't think we are pushing for that. What we want is honestly a consistent way of putting drones on the right evolution track. That's it. So CONOPS informs everything else, and that should be clear in our heads first. So that's why we worked on it right at the beginning. So I mean, I'm looking at the guest list for today. The participant list. So we have Raghav from IdeaForge, if I'm not mistaken, and a few names I don't recognize. So maybe you guys want to have a quick hi, hello there, if you want.
Yeah, hi everyone, Raghav here from IdeaForge.
Hey Raghav, so I mean, we've just opened this up to the industry, right? I think last week we had it with the Aerobridge community.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're trying to get a feedback session going with sort of dialogue opening up with the industry. So that's why you guys are key, and you guys will be able to inform us in the right direction. So any quick notes?
So quick notes is, I think the way things have moved with Drone Rules 2021, I think the aim of the government is to sort of have one overarching mechanism to regulate rather than have something that splits between the different categories of operation, right? Earlier, we had a distinction between VLOS and BVLOS, and all of those trials were happening under the Beam Committee.
Yes.
But now neither the QCI framework, even the ones that may release, and also the Drone Rules 2021 actually make a distinction between the types of operations. Like even night operations are not something that will require an additional layer of compliance. So
Right.
I was just wondering what would be your mode of engagement with the regulator to sort of convince them to bring these concepts back in and make sure that the entire chain, the regulatory chain from the regulation to the certification to CONOPS to the new UTM framework that's come out, will sort of take this approach, because to them, they see the current approach as an evolution from the previous understanding, not really something that's missing from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we don't, sorry, we don't expect them to swing back to the earlier versions, for example, but at least bring some semblance of risk back into the discussion. That's one primary goal, right? So that's why we said this graded approach is actually needed. Specific operational criteria which haven't been talked at all anywhere in all the recently published literature. Again, we'll have to sort of go through them so point by point and explaining the risks and try to, yeah. But the I mean, I get your point, because the way they see it, things have actually moved in the right direction. But honestly, we expect that there'll be things going wrong very soon, right? So that means we will have to sort of point them out with actual examples of things going wrong, meaning, I don't know, lawsuits, things like that, or accidents. Once we have those things happening, then we can feed back alongside our own, let's call it an informed discussion on the concept of operations, or for that matter, UTM policy, which is more scientific or yeah, informed. Let's call it just that for the.
Makes sense.
If I can add to that, Raghav, you make a very, very valid point. And actually, the sessions that we are doing is an attempt to reach out to the industry to kind of get us support, community support, so that the government does not keep doing these kind of policy swings. So 2 days back, there was a session being conducted by IIM Ahmedabad, where Mr. Amba Dubey, the JS, was there, and he was cognizant during the session that if there are a couple of accidents, the whole thing could collapse. And there is an understanding that there needs to be risk understanding, acknowledgement, and mitigation techniques in there. But then the other, there has been a huge element of the industry which has also suffered very significantly because some very tight policy existed all along. So even now, the question of how scientifically we are approaching the whole issue, or how much based on knowledge, is an open question. And that is why probably, I mean, the concept of operations is not a formal document. It can be made a formal document, but it's more a open thinking kind of a document, so that once you have that ironed out, then you can start evolving the whole unrolling of the operations and supporting infrastructure in that manner. And that's where we are trying to build up more and more awareness in the industry as a whole, so that these things, I mean, wish we had a CONOPS 5 years ago. We would not have been bottling up the industry the way we have been, or we could definitely had made more progress. And if you do a global scan, every country which has been tackling this or actually allowing operations to happen has kind of started on CONOPS. Even UTM has CONOPS now. So we are actually looking for support on those issues.
So I absolutely agree with that. What I may suggest is maybe to have a wider circulation amongst industry. So I can't see the participant list, but either way, it may be a good idea to reach out with this approach to both contributing to the CONOPS, to both DFI and FICCI's drone committee. I think they've done some great work in the past, and they also have the understanding of how to sort of take this along and match the regulator's momentum, or at least try to take it with the regulator with their approach.
Yeah, at least match speeds at some point, right? So we have to have a roadmap till, yes.
Exactly, because I think the current approach, there may be a mismatch with what the regulator may expect, and also
yeah, we were hoping that Smith would turn up today, but it's not. Yeah, we hope to keep this going on a weekly basis, so we'll try to get him on board as quickly as possible.
Makes sense. Also, one more point on the insurance. I think insurance is something that maybe we can bolster a bit in terms of what's already available in the market. I think there are at least there is at least one big brand name that's offering it, and there's another one either already
Yes, so
there or
that is,
located.
yeah, definitely new things happening.
And I think the costing as well is not really a bottleneck. It's far, far, far less than the cost of a drone.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
were very excited to hear about Tropogo and so forth. So.
Tropogo, yeah.
Correct. So Tropoco is just the platform. I think they're actually powered by HDFC is the actual issuer. Yeah, correct.
Okay, HDFC. Okay, I thought
think
it
so,
was
yes.
Tata Alliance.
That's what I thought as well.
I think it's one of them. It's definitely a big brand name. I could be wrong, but it is definitely a brand name insurance provider that's offering it underneath Tropogo's layer. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the product developer essentially. The underwriter is
Right,
still
yeah, they're the
Tata
platform.
or one of those big. Yeah. Yeah, so that's exciting. So because I mean, at the time we had written it up, the concept of operations and our own feedback letter on the drone rules. At that time,
Draft drone
Tropogo was
rules.
still figuring stuff out. So
and actually the way things have panned out is more in accordance with what we had kind of tried to suggest, that the market forces will find a place and get into the act, and let us not try and mandate any insurance issues. But it's a very positive development that the industry is already pitched in kind of, and the regulator is also happy. So that's good.
Yeah, but that's all from me. Just want to reiterate that if not present today, we can reach out offline to both FICCI and DFI for their suggestions.
And not just them, if you have any other suggestions, any other specific people, even that would be most welcome. I mean, it'd be nice, in fact, if you could help us reach out to more specific people to build up consensus on these issues.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, Sunil GD is saying in the chat, HDFC Ergo, ICICI Lombard, Tata AIG are offering drone insurance products currently. Yeah, thanks for that information.